ASRock is joining Gigabyte with a white PCB X870 board. This is the ASRock X870 Steel Legend Wi-Fi, and now that we can talk about pricing and we know what it is, this one might surprise you, or maybe not. Let's do our usual thing. Let's take a bit of a closer look at the Steel Legend, and remember, ladies and gents, this video is, say it with me, not a review. It's just an overview so you can see what comes with this new board and what's physically on the board. Let's jump in.
This video is brought to you by VIPSCDKey.com. Have you ever installed Windows 11 only to see the watermark of death? You don't need to fork out a couple of $100s for a key. You can grab one from today's video sponsor, from VIPSCDKey.com for a tenth of the price. You can use our code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. How good is that? That takes that already cheap Windows 11 key and makes it even cheaper. It's easy as placing your order. Bingo bango. You've got your new key on your orders page. You chuck that key into the activation screen and you're good to go. No more watermark of death. Use code GEAR to get 30% off for this month only. Link in the description. On with the video. Back to you, Nick.
All right, here it is, ladies and gents, the ASRock X870 Steel Legend Wi-Fi. Let's get that motherboard out of the way so we can take a bit of a closer look at everything that comes with this board. Rightio, first of all, we've got some documentation. We've got a quick installation guide with a QR code, and you can scan this if you really want, but you know, it's also here in paper form. There's also the Wi-Fi antenna for the built-in Wi-Fi 7 and for all of your Bluetooth needs. Next up, there's some included Velcro straps. This is a nice little addition just in case you wanted to use them. We've also got this. This is a set of SATA or SATA cables for your 2.5-inch SSDs, all those good old spinning RAS drives. We've also got a thermal probe. You can put this in your case and you can adjust the fan speed based on the thermals inside your case. Next up, we've got this. This is a keycap, just in case you wanted to have a nice little custom ASRock Steel Legend keycap. It probably costs them nothing to add this. And lastly, we've got some free performance. You heard that right, ladies and gents. A sticker that you can put on your case that'll give you about 1 million frames per second in 16K when you're playing Fortnite. Probably not really. That's a joke. All right, let's unsheath the X870 Steel Legend and see what the deal is with this board. But let's start off with the bottom edge of the board. First of all, we've got a front panel audio header. There's a 4-pin 12-volt RGB header and a 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB header. There's also 2 PWM fan headers. There's a clear CMOS header next to that as well. There's also 2 USB 2.0 headers for liquid coolers, RGB controllers, and all that jazz. And then there's the front panel header for all your lights and all your switches and everything to turn on your system and to let you know that it's on. Along the right-hand edge of the board, we have 4 SATA ports for your 2.5-inch SSDs or your spinning RAS drives, a right-angled USB Type-A front panel header, a USB Type-C front panel header, another USB Type-A front panel header. It's not right-angled here, by the way. There's a 24-pin power connector to send juice to your brand new board. There's 2 more 3-pin 5-volt addressable RGB headers. And lastly, on the top right of the board is a debug LED array on the surface of the board. If we take a look at the top edge of the board, we have some more PWM fan headers. There's 3 typically used for liquid coolers and your CPU fan. And on the top left, there's 2 8-pin EPS power connectors. There's also another PWM fan header that's in line with the top M.2 slot. Speaking of slots, let's take a look at the PCIe layout on the Steel Legend. The top slot is a full PCIe Gen 5 by 16 slot, and then there's another full by 16 sized slot, which is a PCIe Gen 4 slot. This has less slots than other X870 boards that we've seen so far. In terms of the VRM layout, this features a 14+2+1 phase VRM setup with 80 amp power stages for the vCore and the SoC, and these are all Dr. Moss chips used for the VRM. You can see there's a massive heatsink at the top, and then there's another huge heatsink for the I/O cover. Now, if we take a look at the socket itself, this is an AM5 socket, and this uses standard AM5/AM4 cooler mounting with pre-installed brackets. If we pop that socket open, you can take a little bit of a look at the LGA 1718 socket. This is compatible with Ryzen 7000, 8000, and 9000 CPUs. You need to be careful when you're using LGA sockets because if you bend one pin, you could destroy the whole thing. But I'm not trying to scare you. That's just how it is. Let's flip the board over so we can take a bit of a look at the backside. As you can see, the I/O shield on ASRock boards is installed via the bottom of the board. But other than that, there's not really that much going on back here. And this is usually the case with these lower end boards. In terms of memory compatibility, this board supports up to 256 gigs of DDR5 memory in total with a maximum speed of 8,000 megatransfers. Now, there's a new M.2 heatsink that we saw with the X870E Taichi Lite with a spring-loaded release mechanism, and you can lift that off quite easily. However, the bottom heatsink does require a screwdriver. Now, this board has 3 M.2 slots in total. It's got a single PCIe Gen 5x4 M.2 slot. That is the slot located towards the top of the board, and the 2 lower slots, which are underneath the bottom PCIe slot, are PCIe Gen 4x4. Lastly, the most important thing for a motherboard is that rear I/O. Now, on the Steel Legend, we've got an HDMI 2.1 port. We've got 2 antenna connectors for the built-in Wi-Fi 7 and the Bluetooth, a BIOS flashback button, a bunch of USB 2.0 ports, some more USB Type-A ports. They are USB 3.2. They're either 10 gig or 5 gig ports on the back. We've got 2 USB 4 ports, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, and an audio interface with optical SPDIF output. And the audio codec is on your screen now as well. I'd be lying if I didn't say that ASRock's Steel Legend series of boards have been some of my favorites since they started to make them, which I think was around about X470. If I'm wrong, I'm probably wrong here, but they've always brought some really nice budget-focused options to their product stack. Now, you can love ASRock, you can hate them, but there's one thing about the Steel Legend boards I've found is they've all been very, very solid and very price competitive. Now, the thing with this board here is it's got all of the features of a regular X870 board. It's got nothing you don't need, everything you need, including things like Wi-Fi 7, which is just standard across most boards we're going to see, as well as 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, which is also something pretty standard. Something I thought was a little bit peculiar about this board was they did what they did with the X870E Taichi Lite, and they don't have a release mechanism for the top PCIe slot. Again, I get it, it's to save money. We'll come back to that because you'll know why after I mention what the price is. Also, the top M.2 slot's heatsink has a quick release, and the bottom still requires you to undo 2 screws. They could have made this some type of quick release mechanism without making you spend more money, so I think that one's a little bit strange considering we're seeing other mid-tier to low-end boards have a quick release system for all the drives. I mean, it's just something I'm getting used to now, and it's kind of hard to live without it. There are a couple other little things I think you guys might find interesting. They didn't go the Gigabyte ICE route with this board. There's a lot of black components on the PCB, like the RAM slots, the 24-pin power connector, EPS connectors, the socket and the socket cover, the mounting brackets, and basically any surface mount component on the bottom of the board. But it makes sense because, again, this is supposed to be a price-conscious board. Speaking of the price, this one might surprise you, or maybe it's too much money, but at the time of filming, the ASRock X870 Steel Legend Wi-Fi is going for around $259 US. I'm not sure what the Aussie pricing is at the moment. I would say somewhere in the vicinity of around about 400 Aussie dollars, but given the trend that we've seen with higher end and higher chipset motherboards, this is not terrible value, especially considering we saw X670 boards be at least 100 US dollars or more with less features than this. So yeah, looking pretty interesting. We will have a build with this board coming shortly, so make sure you keep your eye holes peeled and the subscribe button is clicked, and let us know what you guys think of this new board from ASRock. I gotta say, I dig the look, but it's not quite as iced out as the Gigabyte Ice board.